This is Gene Monterastelli, and welcome to the Tapping Q&A podcast recorded live to tape from Williamsburg in Brooklyn. This is episode 670, originally aired August 21st, 2025. Hi, everyone. I hope this finds you well, wherever you are and whatever time of day you're getting a chance to listen to this. Thanks for spending a little time with me today. Apologize for my voice. I'm dealing with a little bit of laryngitis, but I wanted to make sure I got this episode out to you all because it is so good and it is so valuable. Little off the beaten path. We haven't done a lot of interviews recently. But my friend Sarah Tobin, who is an absolutely amazing practitioner and trainer who is based in the UK, has just finished and just released an amazing new book called Tapping Into You. It was officially released last week as this goes live, but I was fortunate enough to get an early copy of it, a review copy of it, and it is absolutely beautiful. It's absolutely touching. One of the things, and this is something that's been rattling around in my head a lot, and I actually have a new training coming out that's leaning in this particular direction in a couple of months, is this idea of we have gotten so good at being specific when we are tapping that we're looking for a phrase or a root cause or an issue or a memory, and all of that's really, really valuable. But I also think it's super valuable that we look at the big picture as well and we look at the context. And the thing that I love about Sarah's disposition, and we have a great conversation about it that I'm going to share with you in a moment that you're going to find in the book as well, is it's not about an issue, it's about you as a human. And how do you as a human move through the world? And how do we use tapping as this tool to keep us grounded and to make it even easier for us to do that in an authentic way? And so even if you don't check the book out, I know you're going to love this conversation. Sarah just has so much wisdom. Here is my conversation with Sarah Tobin. Whenever I sit down to create something, an audio program, a book, a training, even if I'm sending an email, every single time I do that, I am always thinking through the lens of who is my audience and what do I want them to know, think, feel, or believe at the end of that particular thing. So I'm not just broadcasting something. So you sat down and you went through this process of writing a book.
Mm-hmm.
At the beginning of that process, what was the intention? Like, who were you writing this for? And at the end of it, in a perfect world, obviously people take what they want. But like, what was your intention or what was your hope for someone who sits down and works their way through this? Because like, it's not just a book that you read, it's something you get a chance to engage with. That's the reason why I use the word work through it. Not that it's work, but like it's a process that we're engaging with. So like, what was your intention or what was your hope? And I would also be interested to hear as you were working through that particular process, if that changed, because sometimes in creation, there's discovery as well.
Brilliant question. So I came to tapping because of trauma and loss over 10 years ago. And tapping was the tool, the only tool that actually helped me transform my life. And it has been in my mind ever since and has driven me every day since to want to share tapping with the world, because I knew that it had so much power to really heal, like to really, really help people let go on a deep trauma basis and then on a regular maintenance basis. So the book was written to bring tapping to a much broader audience than I could reach by myself. And I had found myself working primarily with moms originally, because that was, I suppose, my trauma of becoming a mother and losing our daughter 10 years ago was what propelled me into tapping. So I wanted to give back. I wanted to support moms and women who are struggling with their mental health, with their emotional regulation. And so the book's been written primarily for them, but it's not necessarily about particular traumas. And obviously, when you write a book, it has to be quite generic because you don't know everyone's individual stories. So for me, the idea of having a tool that brings someone back to self was the goal. Tapping into you is like reminding us through all the traumas and all the negative experiences that we've had, there is something within us that is greater than us in a way. And that this kind of soul power, this soul energy I speak about, spirit or whatever kind of individually we connect to that as, and we lose connection to that as we have difficult experiences. So the goal was to bring that to the fore, so to remind people who they are beyond the pain and the suffering that they have experienced. And then I suppose the outcome of working through the book and using the tools would be to have a greater connection with self and a remembrance and a knowing and a confidence in self that they maybe hadn't had prior.
And so you just used the word remembrance. That was actually, as I was reading through it, just scribbling some notes that I wanted to have a conversation about. The word remember showed up in my notes. And so I would love for you to talk about like what you mean by this sense of remembering self. Like that's a really lovely idea, but I'd love to hear like contextually in detail and lived experience, like what does that mean and what is the benefit of that particular piece of it?
Sure. My view on this, and this is my view, and obviously other people also share this view, but other people may not share this view. So I'm just going to share this. My thinking behind remembrance of self is that we are fundamentally an energy inside an avatar of a human body, and that energy is pure unconditional love, and that is our soul, our spirit, our true self or higher self or whatever, oversoul, whatever people kind of want to call it. There's an energy within us that fuels us, that drives us, that is our source of love. And as we move through life, as we even have our in utero experience, from then into our birth experience and then into our early years, and first 7 years being the most crucial for our mindset development and our connection to the world around us, and then beyond into various life experiences, we clock up a web of beliefs. And not only do we create our own beliefs, but we are also kind of born into a greater construct or a system that is beyond us, that has been, I feel, is an ancient construct. It's been 2000 plus years in the making. And so we have all these kind of social beliefs and social structures and concepts that we take on board, as well as our own life experiences, giving us very real, very kind of concrete nervous system feedback around whether something is positive or whether something is negative. And every experience we have, we make a decision or make a belief off the back of that. And that can be positive, it could be negative. We are more negatively wired, negative bias. So our negative experiences hold more weight. So what I'm saying is so that kind of forms this kind of, I see it like as an outer layer, are the big construct that we've been born into, whether it's cultural, religious, patriarchal, matriarchal, this kind of matrix of energy that we are inheriting. And then we have our own personal experiences that create beliefs and shapes our, I suppose, the filter which we live through life. And then inner to that, at the core, is our own soul, and the soul is this source of unconditional love, and the soul doesn't have fear, and it has purpose, and it talks to us all the time, whether we hear it or not. And so the remembering of self is the remembering of the soul, the true nature of us as a human, and every single one of us is worthy. And I think if I could wave a magic wand, I'm sure you feel this too, every single person I work with does not feel worthy, and if I could wave a magic wand, I would remove all these layers. I would help people break free of this construct that we've been born into or created, shaped through life and people around us, and to remember why we are here at the core, to remember our love, to remember our divinity, and to then free us to share that in a more authentic and free way.
As you say that, one of the kind of foundations that I work from in my work is this idea that in order for change to happen, we either need to change the way we see ourselves, the way we see the world, or both. You know, when I'm afraid to do something, it's because I perceive fear. And oftentimes when I become less afraid, it's because I'm understanding the stakes of what is going on, or understanding the actual danger that is there. So I'm changing the way I see the world. And a lot of what you're talking about is how we fit into the world, but also how we see ourselves as we're navigating those particular things, that the stories that we are carrying with us, that we pick up in lots of different ways. And so I think it's good and useful for us to be thinking in those ways, so much so that for an entire calendar year, my spiritual work was I carried a little pink eraser, what you call a little rubber, in my pocket. And every single time I reached into my pocket to touch my keys, it was a reminder that my work is only to let go of the stories that are not useful and are not true for me in this particular moment. And so I have a feeling that's the reason why, like, this idea of remembering who we are resonated so deeply with me as we're navigating that particular thing.
Absolutely. And you make a great point there about story, using the word
Mhm.
story, because that's exactly what it is. It's something that we have created internally as a safety strategy story,
Yeah.
or picked up around us, or being told to us and dictated by others like parents and caregivers and so on.
And so what we're doing inside of that is like, it's like there are these facts that happened, and then there's the meaning that we give to those particular facts, you know, and sometimes we're writing unuseful meaning. You know, I could be a small child who's sitting in the living room and my parents are having a conversation, and maybe one parent is going to move the sprinkler, the other parent goes with them, and they're just having a conversation. And all of a sudden, as a small child, I've been abandoned. And 15 seconds later, they're back in the room because they've done what's going on outside. But because I didn't understand the circumstance, I wrote a story that the people who care for me just walked out on me. And so
Yeah.
all of a sudden I learned, oh, I need to be on guard in a different way. And so learning what is safe and what is unsafe, like, that's a feature. It's not a bug. You know, it's good that I'm learning what is dangerous in the world. The problem is when we, like, write stories that aren't grounded in reality. But once we're carrying that story, it feels as if it is reality. Therefore, we're only going to operate out of those things.
Exactly. It's the filter with which we then view the world. So every experience thereafter will have that same narrative, because we are seeking validation of that story or that strategy to start with. And every strategy is a solution to an immediate problem. You know,
Yeah.
so your younger self felt, or this hypothetical self felt that that abandonment was on the horizon, so created a story around that to protect and hopefully prevent it in the future. But actually, often these strategies turn into self-fulfilling prophecies rather than being the solution that we needed at the time,
Or they're a solution that was useful at the time that is no
in that
longer
moment.
useful today. You
Yes.
know, like
Yeah.
as a small child, I could be in a household that is chaotic. And so I learn the way that I'm safe is if I'm quiet and small and I don't get any attention. And so that actually is a beautiful strategy to keep me
Perfect.
safe
Yeah.
in the moment. And now as an adult, if I'm still implementing that strategy of the way I say safe is to play small, well, I'm not in that same context anymore. And so the useful strategy is, you know, it is useful for me to own an oyster shucker, except when I'm making a loaf of bread. Like, that is a fabulous tool, but it's the wrong context for me to be using that particular
Yes.
thing. And so as we're kind of, the sense of figuring out where we are is finding, because I think one of the things that I think is, years and years ago, my siblings and I were sitting around the kitchen table, and we were talking about what we got from mom and what we got from dad. And my mother just walks through the kitchen, and we were adults when this was happening. So it was at a holiday or something. And we walked through and she goes, you know, you guys are allowed to have some of your own stuff. This isn't all our fault. And so I think there's like this tricky balance as we're kind of like navigating and trying to figure this out is, you know, how do, like, as you're thinking about this, as we're carrying these stories, how do we then assess what are the useful stories? What are the unuseful stories? What are the
Mm,
stories that might have been true and are no longer true, or have never been true, but I've been operating from them? Like,
mhm,
practically, how do we start to engage with something like that?
mm. It's a tricky question, isn't it? I suppose it's you have to start with the symptoms or
Mhm.
the current issue. You know, when you see a client, they're there for a reason, and you start to
Right.
unpack that, and then you kind of work backwards through time to find what the belief is, or what the source or the core event was that enabled that belief to be created. So, you know, it's very much a journey through time, a trip through time. My God, that is a mouthful. To really figure out what is at the root of it. And sometimes these things you cannot figure out by yourself. And other times it's very clear and very obvious. And another clue is your negative talk, is your negative voice, your chatter, how you berate yourself or how you big yourself up, or whose voice is it? Sometimes you can literally hear mom or dad in the words, and the words are maybe older or a bit more archaic or less in use than normal speak now, and that can give you a clue as to where these ideas and thoughts and constructs have come from.
And so, as we're navigating that, one of the ideas that I took away was this idea that trauma is not our fault, but healing is our responsibility. And so I would just kind of love to hear you kind of unpack that idea a little bit as we're kind of navigating. Because like one of the reasons why it resonates so deeply with me is I have lots and lots of clients who come to me who have a very simplified version of law of attraction thinking. And the thought is, if something bad happened in my life, I created that bad thing that happened. And I really like this idea of trauma is not our fault, but healing is our responsibility, because it's not like, well, this happened and I'm powerless. And it's not, this happened because I made it happen. And if I'm in a circumstance where I'm working from, like, at least subconsciously, if I created this for happening, well, then this is my just desserts. This is the place I'm supposed to stay stuck because I've created that thing. So I'd like you, I'd love, talk about that middle path between those things where we're responding to our past and taking responsibility for healing, but doing that in an appropriate way.
Yeah, the manifestation thread is a really interesting one. I personally believe that we create patterns based on the beliefs that we create. And anytime something negative happens in line with that pattern, we are being given an opportunity to break the pattern, to change the belief, to shift the trajectory, to change the timeline, however you want to position it. So actually, everything that is difficult or that we struggle through is an opportunity to really find out the root of something that is actually holding us back. So hopefully I share that, and it's a difficult one to position as well, because responsibility, by taking responsibility, doesn't necessarily mean you have to take blame, right? Because most of all of the negative situations and patterns that happen in the future and so on are subconsciously created. They're not like, oh, I'm setting out to have a really difficult grief process and I'm setting out to be in financial lack because that's going to help me figure something out about myself. No one sets out to have these experiences. So when we take responsibility, we're not taking blame. We're not self-blaming, and we're not blaming others. And there's a kind of a thought around radical responsibility where we're just owning that our life is mirroring back to us what we are thinking, or the healing that we are, the journey that we're on, or the patterns that we're breaking, or the contracts or karma, or whatever we want to think of it as, that there are opportunities to actually go deeper and to heal deeper layers. I think if we take responsibility, I think we actually have to take responsibility of who we are and what we are and where we're going and the healing journey. And because that is part of healing. If we don't take responsibility, we run in avoidance. And if we avoid, we're not owning, we're not accepting what's happened to us. So if we're in denial that something's happened, then we can't accept it. We can't bring compassion to it. We can't honor it. We can't give forgiveness to it. We can't love ourselves through it. So I think it's really important to start with taking some responsibility.
And as you say that, I think of the analogy I use sometimes is a baseball breaks through my front window, and I didn't make the baseball come through my front window. There is now glass all over the living room. And if I don't take responsibility for the fact that there is glass all over my living room, then I'm going to be cutting myself up and things are just going to be bad. And so even though it is there and I didn't make it be there,
Yeah.
it is directly impacting me. And so me responding, taking responsibility for how we move forward is how we clean up that particular mess and we're navigating all of this.
Yeah. It's how we own our actions off the back of a difficult experience. So we all have a choice, don't we? We all have a choice to often, and me included, move into victimhood, when bad things happen to us, because it's awful. We are in shock and we are upset and we are grieving or we are angry. And it's right to feel those feelings. I'm not saying to bypass those at all. But the sooner we can move to acceptance and taking responsibility of the next step that we might have to take, of our own healing journey or cleaning up the glass or whatever it is that's surrounding us, the quicker we'll move through the experience, I think, rather than staying stuck in the pattern and in the story. I mean, we all know people who repeat the same story over and over and over. That's victim energy, and that's going to keep them stuck. That is not going to help them move forward because they haven't been able to process the negative emotions that arose from that original event.
Yeah. Once is an anomaly, twice is a coincidence, 3 times is a pattern. And the moment we same song, different verse, that's a great opportunity for us to go, okay, something curious is going on here. We need to pay attention to.
Yeah.
So then someone who's going, okay, great. I want to start taking more responsibility. I want to start changing the way and remembering who I am. Where does someone start?
Do this might sound bizarre, but in my work recently, we have to start with ego. And we have to get ego on board with the idea of change. We've got to bring safety into the body. And so often I invite ego into conversations as we tap and talk directly to ego. We find out what it's afraid of. We find out what it's not letting go of. And getting ego on board earlier in the process will make the subsequent work much quicker, much easier, because the part of you that is in protective mode, is already on board, is already seeing the benefit of doing this work. And the tapping as a tool to do that brings the safety signals while you're talking to the ego.
And the thing I love about that is it's really hard for me to transform something I'm fighting with. And starting from this place, and you talk about this a number of times, just this idea of it is trying to create safety. And there's a difference between the intention of keeping us safe and actually keeping us safe. And so it's really easy for me to take that critical voice, take that thing that is keeping me small, take that ego piece of it and be angry at it, because the consequences it's creating, the friction is creating, the resistance it's creating in my life. Of course, that makes me angry because it's preventing me from having the outcome that I want. But I love this idea. As we bring it into the process earlier, it gives us the opportunity to honor and acknowledge its intention.
Yeah.
Without honoring and acknowledging its tactic that it's using. It's almost this kind-hearted incompetence. The parts of us that we're struggling with internally are desperately fighting for us. They're just fighting the wrong battle with the wrong tactic in the wrong moment. And so it's tactically doing something wrong. It's not
wrong itself.
And so I love the idea of literally I love the vocabulary they're using here. I'm inviting the ego into this particular process. The other part of and it's so funny. When I'm doing work, I personify my emotions, I personify my subconscious mind, I personify my ego, not because they are distinct personalities inside of me. But what that does is, as a tapper, is it gives me the vocabulary to know how to articulate what is going on. It's easier for me to say, oh, I have a part of me that's trying to keep me safe right now. And I'm glad it's trying to keep me safe and it's actually making a mess of things because
Yeah.
like, again, it doesn't have this intention where it's trying to do anything harmful or useful. It's just programming that's functioning. But like when we like this idea of intention, it's always easier for me, or invitation, it's always easier for me to work with someone I have invited, or it's always easier for me to work with someone else when I have been invited. And so I love that
Yeah.
like that phrase dispositionally. I'm inviting the ego into the process because, like, well, that's the enemy. That's the I just want to be my pure spiritual self, and this part is getting in the way in this human experience. And so I really love that the just like the framing and the intention of that particular piece makes it gentler for me when I'm trying to work on my own healing and transformation, because I've eliminated one of the battles internally by trying to
Exactly.
cooperate with it.
Yeah, I mean, we are both soul and mind. You know, we are ego. You know, and people talk about death to ego and so on, and it's not that at all. It's cooperation with ego. It's alignment with ego. It's knowing what is fear and what is love, and it's the juxtaposition of these two and the balance. You know, we over time can learn what is ego, just being afraid of something based on a construct or based on a belief or a narrative or story, and what is really true. And sometimes that's very hard to distinguish at first. I think tapping really helps us to peel through the layers, because as we release emotions, the truth starts to come through, doesn't it, more? And we can see a different perspective than we may have seen or interpreted or misinterpreted at the original event. Getting ego on side is basically, ego has been created or shaped or has evolved to be as loud as it needs to be based on pain and trauma and suffering. So the invitation here brings compassion. It brings awareness of that suffering. It brings love and forgiveness. And when you do that up front, you're getting an ally back, and it gives the ego's voice chance to come back down, you know, because originally soul probably had the louder voice. As time went on, events came in and ego had to step in, had to take that lead role. And so my goal is always thinking, how can we get more balance here, where me or the client can understand what is ego and what is true soul, true intuition, true purpose. The tapping, I think, is an amazing tool for getting ego on side.
Yeah. Well, as I was reading through the book, I was completely unsurprised by the book, not by what is in it, but it's like this big, thoughtful, compassionate, warm hug of guidance. And so as I was reading my way through it, like I felt like I was hanging out with you in that particular way. Like it's not just like, it's such a lovely tangible process with lots of useful things inside of it, but like you and your soul and your heart come pouring through it in such a lovely way, which I think just makes it significantly more accessible for folks to engage with. So I just like I'm so thrilled that I got a chance to
Aw.
read it. And I'm so thrilled that you spent the time to create this beautiful object.
Thank you. Yeah, it was a soul calling, and it was an initiation, you know, the process of writing, and there's a vulnerability about it with also equal measures of excitement and delirium and fear, and you know, all sorts of emotions, I think, when you put your heart into something. And it's 10 years worth of like grief, you know, that
Mhm.
started all of this. And so it just feels like a very big moment for a legacy, or to give something back, and to
Yeah.
hopefully inspire others to use it, the tool, to go a little bit deeper with the tool, to reach out to other practitioners and recognize it as the most amazing, oh, trauma transforming tool there is.
Awesome. Well, thanks for your time, Sarah. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Jane. It was an honor to talk to you.
So as you can see, just absolutely beautiful. I always love chatting with her. She's a gift that was given to us when we were looking for speakers for recommendations for the 24 hours of tapping, and someone brought her to our attention. We did not know she existed, and it's just been a blessing to us and the tapping community. If you'd like to get a copy of the book or to learn more about it, it's really, really easy. All you need to do is go to tapwithsarahtobin.com/book. All one word, tapwithsarahtobin.com/book. And there's all sorts of places all over the world that you can get the book. So you can find it from a place that is convenience or is local or whatever works for you. You can find all of the details right there. You should really, really check it out. It is just a warm hug of an encouragement of a book. Other thing that you should check out, at the end of every single episode, we always send you to a different episode. I got this idea from Alex Schmidt from Secretly Incredibly Fascinating, which is a podcast that I love that feeds my nerdy little brain. And so what I did before I sat down to record this little intro and this outro was I hit my random number generator and I came up with number 418. And that leads you to the podcast Tapping for a Fresh Start. So if you're looking to start something new, if you want to re-engage with something, this is the one you need to check out. All you need to do is go to tappingqa.com/418. That's tappingqa.com/418. And you can check that episode out right now. It is waiting for you. You can always check out the entire podcast archive at tappingpodcast.com, where we have over 670 episodes waiting there for you. As you look at the screen right now, you can see a playlist to many of the video versions of the podcast. Just click on that and dive in. And I look forward to talking with you and tapping with you again real soon. Bye-bye.